So let us look at these questions. Ever-green revolution is necessary to ensure sustainable agriculture. Discuss. So it was Dr. Swaminathan who coined the term evergreen revolution. So when the government was talking about the second green revolution, he said that what we require is not second green revolution, but evergreen revolution. What is he saying there? Basically, the objective of evergreen revolution is to increase the production and productivity, so that we can meet short-term and long-term goals of food production. We can meet short-term and long-term goals of food production. And the objective is to make sure that we produce more from less. That is less land, more from less. Sustainable agriculture. Less land, less pesticides, and less water. And this can be done with the help of better disease crops, protecting the crops from diseases, better soil health, protecting crops from diseases. Second, better soil health and fertility. And what Swaminathan says is that in case of Western countries, they have three advantages which we don't have. First one is he talks about technology, second capital, third subsidies. Again, if you go by Niti Aayog report, in the next 7 to 8 years, there is every possibility of India facing again severe food crisis. Niti Aayog report has talked about it. So that is what he talked about. So that is the reason why we are talking about evergreen revolution. So this evergreen revolution, as the name itself indicates, it should be for the entire country. The first green revolution was restricted to some parts of the country, for entire country. The second, it should include all crops, not only food crops. It must include all crops. Third, it should focus on long-term sustainable goals. We should focus on long-term sustainable goals. And fourth, it should generate enough surpluses for farmers. It should generate enough surpluses for farmers, especially small and marginal farmers. Small and marginal farmers, because the first green revolution benefited only large farmers, big farmers. Big farmers. And another problem is that the previous green revolution had become greed revolution. That is what Swaminathan has said. Green revolution, the previous green revolution had become greed revolution. That is, in the name of increasing productivity, we used excessive pesticides. We have become greedy. Excessive pesticides and improper and imbalanced use of fertilizers. Improper and imbalanced use of fertilizers. It also resulted in excessive use of groundwater. Excessive use of groundwater, resulting in increasing salinity of the water also. Increasing salinity of the water. And it did not focus on land reforms. It did not focus on land reforms. So what Swaminathan says is that this evergreen revolution should focus on all these areas. It must focus on all these areas. And most importantly, he says that farming should be made attractive profession. At present in India, farmers are simply, young people are not willing to take up farming. It should be made attractive profession for young people. That is what he talked about. Yes. That is what we have asked other questions also. Yes, there also you can talk about. So this is what you have to write. I am sure this year definitely the question can be about this evergreen revolution in agriculture. Or even if the question is also not asked as part of reforms in agrarian sector, you have to talk about this evergreen revolution. Next, credit crunch faced by the economic system recently due to failure of NBFCs is posing serious challenges to revive economic system. Suggest solutions. So the why credit countries are being faced because of the failure of IL and FS. 1 lakh crores of rupees were lost. The failure of IL and FS, and it has also what you call a chain effect on the banking system. On the banking system also, these financial institutions have failed, and banks also are facing serious problems, which is impacting liquidity in the market. Liquidity in the market. Banks simply don't have enough liquidity in the market. So the question is how to revive this economic system from the severe credit crunch that we are facing now. What can be done? So you can see in the budget, the government had asked commercial banks to take to provide financial support to those NBFCs which are in good condition. To provide financial support to those NBFCs which are in good condition. Second, recapitalization of banks. Recapitalization of banks. Please remember, all these are from the budget only. Every year one question is always asked from the budget. Recapitalization of banks. 70,000 crores of rupees. Third, reviving long-term financial institutions like IDBI. Yesterday you must have seen the finance minister has talked about reviving IDBI by providing financial assistance to IDBI. What is the reason why? The credit crunch is there. Normally in the financial system, these banks normally are expected to provide a short-term and medium-term lending to industries. Whereas before that, it was these financial institutions like IDBI, IFCI, ICICI, they were the ones who provided long-term financial assistance to industries. Now with the collapse of these financial institutions, banks are expected to provide this long-term financial assistance also. In place of this IDBI, IFCI and ICICI, we have institutions like IL and FS which had come into existence. But the problem is that this IL and FS, they don't have the kind of accountability mechanisms that earlier institutions had, resulting in the collapse of these financial institutions. So that is the reason why even the budget also proposed measures to finance these to provide financial assistance to financial institutions so that they can provide long-term financial assistance to industries also. Fourth thing, the government has done basically is reducing repo rates and reverse repo rates. But again, the problem with the repo rates and reverse repo rates is that banks are not willing to transfer the same to the customers. There is huge amount of time lag, minimum 4 to 6 months. That is the reason why, if you look at again today's newspaper, today or yesterday, it was said that RBI has directed the commercial banks to transfer these repo rates and reverse repo rates on a real-time basis. On real-time basis. On real-time basis. And this is part of what you call monetary policy. As part of a fiscal policy, the government is also increasing its capital expenditure. Government is also focusing on increasing its capital expenditure. In the budget also, recent budget also, compared to the previous year, the capital expenditure component of overall budgeted expenditure is high. So that this money can also revive investment as well as help the government in overcoming credit crunch. And then what is the long-term measure you have to talk about? The long-term measure you have to talk about is India must develop a secondary market, especially in stock markets. Primary market is there, is vibrant in India, but not secondary market. Secondary market should be developed so that industries can raise finances through the other route also. In India, still industries are dependent more on loans than raising money through equities. Secondary market should be developed. So this is what you have to write for this question. Again, I am expecting this year all the questions are about recession and credit crunch and functioning of financial system. All these things, because these are the things which are there in the news today, nowadays. Next, do you think the autonomy of central bank has been compromised in recent times? Yes. Yes. Why? Because why they were closed initially? Because they had become inefficient and corrupt. During the license quota permit Raj, loans were given to industrialists. Yeah, that is when Lasimar committee has. Not at all. That is the reason why hoping that they will become good. We have not addressed the structural issues. Yes. But again, that is what, you have to revive it somehow. The government should make measures. Secondary market in terms of, primary market means IPOs. Secondary market means, again, they are traded. So that it gives, people should keep on buying and selling them. So that these companies will keep on getting money. For example, the share is issued for 10 rupees. In the secondary market, it can be sold for 1000 rupees. This 990 rupees will be what the company will be getting. That is what. Corporate bond market, yes. Next, do you think the autonomy of central bank has been compromised in recent times? Substantiate your answer with relevant examples. It has been compromised in recent times. So why is it that we are saying that autonomy of central bank has been compromised? Three instances we have to quote here. One is demonetization. Demonetization. The central bank board was asked to meet and give a recommendation to the government regarding demonetization. The decision was taken by central government, and the decision was asked to be approved by the central bank. For demonetization, normally the recommendation should come from the central bank on its own, but it was superimposed on central bank. Second one is MPC, Monetary Policy Committee. Earlier, these interest rates were decided by RBI governor along with the rest of the board members. Now you have Monetary Policy Committee, wherein the members are from outside RBI also. MPC, Monetary Policy Committee. Third, when it comes to this prompt corrective action, PCA, RBI has prescribed this prompt corrective actions for public sector banks. But government had asked RBI to go slow on PCA. And to overcome this problem, what did the government do? Government had opted for a merger of banks also to overcome this problem. Fourth, in a recent decision of RBI to transfer surplus 1.76 lakh crores to transfer surplus 1.76 lakh crores to the government. So, with these decisions, we can say that central bank's autonomy has been compromised. That is what the critics say. But what is the other viewpoint here? Other viewpoint says that monetary policy cannot be determined independently of a fiscal policy. It cannot be determined independently of a fiscal policy. Rapid growth and development is possible only when both the monetary and fiscal policy go together. And we can say that all these measures, can be seen in a positive perspective and say that to ensure coordination rather than taking away autonomy. To ensure coordination between the finance ministry and the central government rather than taking away. Why? Because all over the world, the central banks are always in conflicts. All over the world, central banks are always in conflict with finance ministry regarding interest rates. Whether it is Federal Reserve Bank or Bank of England or any other bank, there is conflict between central bank and finance ministries all over the world. And that is the reason why in India we have come out with a compromise solution in the form of monetary policy committee to ensure stability in interest markets, in financial markets. And then as far as this transfer of a surplus is concerned, it has been recommended by a committee headed by former governor of RBI itself, Bimal Jalan. So obviously the committee has a lot of credibility. So to say that taking away autonomy of Reserve Bank, central bank is not right. As we said, at the end of the day, it is not about autonomy of RBI. It is about efficiency of RBI that really matters, not autonomy. Efficiency and accountability of RBI that really matters. That is what we write. Next, doubling farmers in minimum support price. Yeah. That is what we will discuss as part of banking sector reforms. We have one more question about banking sector reforms. There we will talk about that. Doubling minimum support price is necessary but not sufficient to alleviate the sufferings of farmers. Analyze. Why it is necessary but not sufficient? Why? Because according to a survey, only 6% of farmers benefit out of minimum support price. It benefits only 6% of farmers in the country. Only 6% of farmers. Why? Because it is mostly implemented for two crops, rice and wheat. It benefits only two crops, rice and wheat, and only specific regions, Punjab, Western Uttar Pradesh, parts of Tamil Nadu and AP, where FCI, Food Corporation of India, is active in buying food grains from farmers. Whereas poorer states like UP, Bihar, MP, Chhattisgarh do not benefit out of this, because FCI does not have either infrastructure or personnel to procure food grains. Third important reason why. It is said that Indian farmer is a net buyer of food grains. average Indian farmer is a net buyer of food grains rather than being a net seller of food grains. What do you mean by net buyer of food grains? That is, whatever that he produces is not sufficient for his own existence, for the needs of his family. So he has to buy more from the market. So that is the reason why doubling minimum support price will not alleviate the sufferings of farmers. And as we have said, it will only benefit already those farmers who are rich and powerful. Rich farmers will become richer because only they have marketable surplus. Only rich farmers have marketable surplus. So what should the government do? What else can the government do? This Kisan scheme is good. This is income support scheme. Kisan scheme. It is good because you are giving money to them. Kisan. Income support scheme. Second, the government should focus on improving infrastructure in agriculture. Then contract farming. Then food processing industries. Government should expand it food processing industries. Then it should focus on constructing warehouses and cold storage houses. Warehouses and cold storage houses. Like this, you can give as many solutions as you want. Every year, please remember, at least 3 questions out of 10 from economy, at least 3, maximum it can be 4 or 5 also, are from only agriculture. Very, very important. Next, write a note on India's green energy corridor to alleviate the problems of conventional energy. I think this is part of science and technology. You have got science and tech answers? No? Okay, I will just ask you. You will be getting the answers. Science and technology answers, printed answers. You did not get it? Okay, you will get it. The science and tech. Green energy corridor. I think this is when Nitin Gadkari had introduced this green energy corridor. I am expecting this question, green energy corridor. It can be asked either in economy or science and technology. Have you heard about this green energy corridor? Yes? What is it? What else? No. Don't worry, you will find out. These kind of questions can be asked, either science and tech or economy. Definitely they will be asked. In fact, I have given this as a part of economy, and our science and tech faculty has given it as part of science and tech also. I said that let us put it as part of science and tech only. Next, jobless growth and widening regional inequalities are creating internal security problems for India. Discuss. So basically what we are discussing is that those people who are unemployed, they are becoming what we call antisocial elements. Those who are unemployed, they are becoming antisocial elements. And second one is regional inequalities. regional inequalities also. So the question is how this is happening and why it is taking place. Jobless growth and widening regional inequalities are creating internal security problems for India. Why it is happening, why it is taking place. So what we are saying here is that, for example, widening regional inequalities, the basic problem for regionalism, secessionism in India is because of perceived backwardness, and which is creating major law and order problems. Give the example of Gurkha land, give the example of Northeast, give the example of even Jammu and Kashmir also, or in other parts of the country. What is the reason why we are witnessing so much of increasing intolerance? Why? Because of this jobless growth. Because of this jobless growth, people are always looking for government jobs. That is resulting in caste conflicts, which is a major internal security problem in India. Caste violence. Last year the question was asked as part of internal security. Caste conflicts. Similarly, as well as this, we talked about this, all the problems in Northeast, Nagaland, Mizoram, Meghalaya, all these places, the basic issue is basically about lack of development, absence of development. And of course, you can include Bengal also. In all these places, there is so much of growing unrest in the entire Hindi belt as well as in the rest of the country also. Most of this unrest can be attributed to two things. One is jobless growth. The second one is widening regional inequalities. That is the reason why, if you look at this year's annual report of Ministry of Home Affairs, annual report of Ministry of Home Affairs identified this regionalism, which is propelling Naxalism, as well as this jobless growth, which is resulting in more caste conflicts, are the two important reasons for increasing two important problems of internal security faced by India at this point of time. That is what this basically I have taken from Ministry of Home Affairs annual report only. So what is the solution here? Obviously, once you know the problem, the solution is not far off to find out. The solution is that the government should focus on creating more jobs, employment generation. It should be the top priority of the government. If you look at it again, the unemployment rate in India is the highest in the last 45 years. Unemployment rate in India is the highest in the last 5 years. And so is the same is the problem with, as we keep on saying, widening regional inequalities, which is resulting in mostly migration of people from backward regions to other parts of the country. When they are migrating from backward regions to other parts of the country, it is creating more problems. And that is the reason why what we are witnessing nowadays is the sons of the soil argument, reservations on the basis of region, son of the soil argument. Whether it is Assam, the whole objective of this National Register of Census, NRC, is to ensure that son of the soil argument only, because the migrants from other places had come up and they have taken their jobs. So the solution lies in economic. Yesterday, the other day, if you happen to read newspapers, the Times of India, the DGP of Chhattisgarh, he talked about the problem, same thing. He said that Naxalism, we can tackle Naxalism as a law and order issue in the short term, but in the long term, we must ensure inclusive and equitable growth. Then only we can find solutions to these internal security problems like Naxalism, regionalism, secessionism, and jobless growth. Next, disaster management in India has become difficult due to concerns of economic growth and development. Discuss with relevant examples. Why disaster management has become difficult? Why? Because simply it has almost become impossible. It has almost become impossible for us to balance, ensure balance between economic growth and environmental stability, ecological equilibrium. economic growth and ecological equilibrium. Disaster management has become extremely difficult for India. Why? Because we cannot ensure balance between economic growth and ecological equilibrium. The government must provide housing for all. Housing for all. If the government has to provide houses for everyone, you require land. Where does the land come from? Land is completely inelastic. Similarly, the government has to provide employment. Government has to increase the standard of life. It must increase standard of life. Then, government should focus on infrastructure, developing infrastructure. And government must ensure industrialization. And if the government has to do all these things, how can the government do all these things? Only by utilizing natural resources. Natural resources. Take the case of housing. The government is allowing constructions even in those areas which are considered environmentally, ecologically sensitive. Coastal areas. Coastal areas, ecologically sensitive. That is the reason why the government is flexible with environmental rules and regulations. Right? Next, if you have to increase your agricultural productivity, you may require irrigation. That is the reason why government is allowing many multi-purpose irrigation projects to come up, knowing fully well that they can cause damage to ecological equilibrium. Multi-purpose irrigation projects. Next, you must also utilize the mineral resources available in forests. Mineral resources available in forests. Again, that requires exploitation of forests. It requires exploitation of forests. Next, the government, especially in urban areas, in urban infrastructure, it is almost impossible to ensure balance between developing urban infrastructure and maintaining ecological equilibrium in urban areas. And still, maximum amount of our power is generated only from coal, and again the coal mines, which again causes environmental degradation. So this is where the problem. So the government always faces this challenge between satisfying the short-term needs of people versus long-term consequences. Satisfying short-term needs of people. Should the government remove immediate poverty of people or look at long-term consequences of its actions? So when this is the choice available to the government, what will the government do? That is where the problem is. That is the reason why disaster management in India has not been successful. We are yet to find what is that mythical solution wherein we can satisfy the short-term needs of the immediate needs of the people and ensure long-term, ensure that ecological equilibrium in the long term also. There is no solution, unfortunately. That is the reason why disaster management in a country like India is very, very difficult. Disaster management is never on the top priority of the government because what is the point of talking about a clean and a green environment when you are not able to satisfy the basic needs of the people? What is the solution then? Can there be any solution? What is the solution? But again, immediately can you shift from coal to hydel and wind power or solar power? We don't have the technology. So you have to depend on coal at least for the next 10-15 years. We cannot. and coal is highly polluting. We know that. And we have to construct houses for people. Can you say that it is ecologically sensitive region, so we cannot construct houses? You have to exploit the mineral resources, right? That is where the problem is. That is what the question says. Disaster management in India, has become difficult due to concerns of economic growth and development. Discuss with relevant examples. Next, police reforms are necessary. Pardon? Solutions, what kind of solutions? You have to talk about only theoretical solutions. Theoretical solutions like implementing NDMA Act 2005, making disaster management an integral part of our planning process at the local level, creating awareness among the citizens, moving towards green energy, sustainable agriculture. All those solutions which we keep on writing all the time, which are only basically lip service, paying lip service. Otherwise, it is not possible. For example, in a city like Delhi, which is highly polluted, can you stop people from using private vehicles? Ask them to use only public transport. Yes, and to improve public transport, you require money. And the government, what did the Delhi government does? Take all the money and give free subsidies. That is where the problem. Why? Because you win elections only with these free subsidies. Next year elections are there, Delhi Assembly. So the Delhi state government has given free electricity also, up to 200 units, free electricity. Already free, water is given. And of course, for poor people, free food and everything is given. That is where the problem is. Everything is interrelated. Next, police reforms are necessary to make police efficient, effective and accountable. Discuss the significance of police reforms in facing the challenge of internal security. So why police reforms are needed? Why? Because all the challenges related to internal security are directly linked to police reforms. So what are the challenges that we are talking about in internal security? What are the challenges faced by the country in terms of internal security? What are the challenges faced by the country in terms of internal security? The present major challenges: Naxalism, terrorism, Jammu and Kashmir, J&K, then secessionism, then cyber crime, then regionalism, then caste conflicts, then communalism, then financial crimes like money laundering, then cross-border infiltration, and then another major issue is crimes against women. So in internal security, you will get questions only from these topics all the time. Every year, you will get only questions from these topics in internal security. You see, last 6 years papers, the questions are only about from these topics. Then if you want, you can include these. In internal security, you can also talk about this. In a security related to waterways, especially protecting these waterways, because terrorists in 2008 they had come through. Yes, Mumbai, inland waterways. Maritime security. both inland as well as international, because through inland waterways smuggling is taking place, smuggling, and international waters also, maritime security. If you look at even your internal security, only the questions from only these topics in the last 6 years, and they have asked almost all the topics. So what they have to do, they have to keep on repeating the same questions. So what we are saying is that all these challenges are related to only one thing: implementing police reforms. Unless we implement police reforms, we cannot solve any of these problems. Unless we implement police reforms, we cannot solve any of these problems. So what are the reforms that we are talking about? Basically the template is two things here: ensuring autonomy and accountability. Ensuring autonomy and accountability of police forces. Ensuring autonomy and accountability of police forces. In how to ensure autonomy of police forces? By depoliticizing police forces, the functioning of police forces. That is what they say. The CBI will always be a caged parrot. Sometimes the cage will be controlled by Congress or sometimes by BJP. But the parrot will always be a parrot. The cage will be the same, because they don't have any autonomy. Depoliticization of police forces. And then when it comes to accountability, police themselves commit so many excesses. That is what the other day Chhattisgarh DGP has said. The previous government was successful in controlling Naxalism, but the means adopted by the government were really questioned. Why? Because police themselves have committed so many excesses. Excesses, or police themselves have committed so many excesses. They have committed sexual crimes against tribal women, and they resorted to third-degree torture to get confessions from Naxalites, which accentuated the problem. The same thing is happening in Jammu and Kashmir also, and the same thing happened in these secessionist states also, northeast also. Why? Because these legislations like AFSPA are giving huge amount of powers to army as well as police forces. Similarly, Disturbed Areas Act, all these things. That is the reason why what we are saying is that we must ensure accountability, and another thing is that we must ensure efficiency of police forces. Why? Because if you look at all these investigative agencies, CBR, CA, or any other investigative agencies, their conviction rate is less than 10%. ED, CBI, or any other agencies, their conviction rate is less than 10%. Next, they still use primitive methods to get confession. They are not, using what you call modern techniques. Our police still are not. And the next thing is that they don't have any knowledge about the cyber crimes and financial crimes, because they require specialized skills. Cyber crimes and financial crimes. For example, ED, Enforcement Directorate, they simply could not do the money trial in all the major money laundering cases, because they don't have any experts. And financial crimes and cyber crimes, the same is the problem. That is the reason why we talk about the police reforms. Now, what are the essence of police reforms? To make them efficient, accountable, and ensure autonomous functioning. That is what we say, and that is what Supreme Court also has talked about in the Prakash Singh versus Union of India case. Prakash Singh versus Union of India, 2006 Supreme Court judgment talked about Prakash Singh versus Union of India. 2006 Supreme Court judgment talked about 7 important reforms. 5 reforms related to autonomy and 2 related to accountability, to make the functioning of police forces efficient and accountable. You have to write those things. Obviously, but somewhere you have to start. Let us start with police reforms. Next, Mission Shakti, Gaganyaan, these things are part of science and technology. I think you have got the answers there. Next, critically analyze the impact of policy uncertainty on investment scenario in India with specific examples. Most of these questions I have taken only from economic survey only. UPSC will never go beyond economic survey. In the previous test on economy, that is Journals paper 3, we have asked more specific questions. This time the questions are more analytical rather than specific ones. UPSC asks questions by combination of both. Critically analyze the impact of policy uncertainty on investment scenario in India with specific examples. How policies uncertainty has affected investment scenario in India. So what do you say here? Between that is what again economic survey says. Between 2009 and 2014, we had what is called policy paralysis in India. Policy paralysis in India, which had a huge impact on our investment scenario as well as economic growth. Indian economy was growing at 9% per annum. It had come down to 4.5% because of policy paralysis and policy uncertainty. And why this policy uncertainty at that point of time? One is this compulsions of coalition government, compulsions of coalition governments. Second, judicial activism. Third, investigations by CAG, CBI, continuous investigations by CAG and CBI, have forced bureaucracy to become inactive. It has a major impact. And fourth, of course, the most important, global scenario. Global scenario. Then come to the present times again. At present again, this policy uncertainty had also a major impact on our investment scenario. What is this policy uncertainty? The government implemented radical reforms like demonetization. Nobody expected this demonetization. It has created so much of uncertainty in the markets. And immediately, it was followed by GST. And in between, continuously, the government kept on changing, these import and export duties. And fourth, the government also, this RBI also frequently changed its monetary policies. There is huge amount of uncertainty regarding monetary policies. And then, in the last few years, the government had opted for protectionism. Not only the developed countries, even India also opted for protectionism by imposing a huge amount of tariffs on imports. Protectionism. And then he also have policy for uncertainty in agriculture, especially agricultural exports. Government keep on coming out with the new rules and regulations. Next one is still environment is always environmental rules and regulations are creating policy uncertainty. And then continuous elections also. Continuous elections also. For example, give the example of a recent budget wherein the government had imposed a tax on super rich people and taxes on foreign companies also. investing in India? Yes. Obviously, why do you have to impose? It has created so much of uncertainty in the stock markets, right? So that is what you say. That is the reason why economic survey says that one of the important requirements is to ensure that there is policy certainty and continuity. That is what it says. Next, yeah, RBI itself has said we don't have to criticize. A recent report of RBI clearly mentioned that demonetization has failed to achieve any of its objectives. Huh? It has clearly said. Yes, it has said. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah. Obviously, this is what critical analysis only. Yes. Next, agrarian reforms in India should go beyond conventional and look for creative solutions. Discuss. So, what are the creative solutions that we are looking at for agrarian reforms? In India, we are only opting for what is called incrementalism in agrarian reforms also. We should look for creative solutions. What are the creative solutions? So, everyone is talking about land reforms. Everyone is talking about land reforms. That is what Swaminathan says. He says that nowadays land reforms have become completely useless in the present day circumstances. Land reforms should have been effective, would have been effective had they been implemented in 1950s, not in 2020s. He says that people, I don't know why people talk about land reforms, they are not required now. What he says is that not land reforms, what we require is asset reforms. That is what Swaminathan talks about. He says that what we require is asset reforms. So, what do we mean by this asset reforms in comparison to land reforms? Basically, he says that he talks about reforms in the whole system of agriculture and horticulture combined together. What is this? He says that livestock, fish, pond, trees, forest management, access to non-food forest products, and access to community land. Access to community land. That means we should make all these things available to poor farmers rather than only focusing on land reforms. And that is what he says. He says that wherever it is possible, implement land reforms. But otherwise, don't unnecessarily restrict yourself in these land reforms. Think creatively. That is what he says. Next one is, he also says that let women also be made eligible for land rights. Another creative solution he suggests is that what we are witnessing is feminization of agriculture. So let women also be made eligible for land rights. Yeah. Just like we have 1/3 reservations for women in parliament, let us also have the same kind of thing in terms of distribution of assets. Let women be the owners of these assets, because they can manage resources in a more efficient manner than men. Next thing, as part of creative solutions, what are the other things that we can talk about as part of creative solutions. Next thing as he suggests is instead of land reforms, we can have contract farming, because cooperative farming also in India has failed. Contract farming, so that there is better linkage between industry and agriculture. Contract farming, better linkage between industry and agriculture. What is industry supposed to do as part of this contract farming? What is industry supposed to do? Yes, as part of contract farming, what they are expected to do is, first one is they will provide the necessary credit to farmers. Necessary credit to farmers. Second, they focus on extension services. Agriculture extension services. Third, they create infrastructure in the form of cold storage houses and warehouses. Cold storage houses and warehouses. Fourth, the focus will be on food processing industries, because especially in case of fruits, food processing industries. So this is what as part of extension services they are given better seeds, better pesticides and everything else, given complete information about irrigation and everything else. Better industry and agriculture linkages. Yeah, technological help. Extension services come under all the things. This is what. Next thing that we suggest is better coordination between these research organizations, institutions. PUSA is there, agricultural research organizations are there all over the country. Research organizations, then industry associations, and then farmers. Research organizations, research institutions, industrial organizations, and farmers. So that there will be better interlinkages. Right now, all of them function in an independent silos. That is what anything that has been suggested. Next thing, what are the other creative solutions that you can offer in agriculture? Next thing, as we have said, earlier also as we have said, agriculture should not be looked from only the point of view of food production or cereal production or anything else. It should be linked to horticulture and all other professions in the rural areas, livestock, fish ponds, everything that is what we said, asset reforms. Next, what are the other reforms? As I said, in fact we have discussed this earlier also. Agriculture, like any other profession, software or civil services in India, it should be made attractive profession for young people. When can agriculture be made attractive profession for young people? When can we make agriculture an attractive profession for young people? There are people between 15 to 25 years. When can we make them attractive profession? Obviously, when the rate of return is very high. That is what, rate of return is very high. That is what we say. This agriculture should be made an attractive profession, both in terms of intellectually stimulating. It should help them to utilize their intelligence in a far efficient manner. If you are sitting in a software company and doing the things, after some point of time you get bored doing the same job. Whereas in agriculture you can always come out with new innovations and new research. It should be made intellectually stimulating and economically rewarding also. Intellectually stimulating and economically rewarding also. Based on what we call precision farming techniques, precision PRECISION, precision farming techniques and modern post harvest technologies. in a, and modern post-harvest technologies. And this is where again you can quote Mahatma Gandhi. What did Mahatma Gandhi has said? He said that unless we end this distance between intellect and labor, unless we reduce this distance between intellect and labor, Indian agriculture will always remain stagnant. Why? That means what we are saying is that intelligent people are not entering into these activities, resulting in stagnation in our agriculture. Are you getting the point here? I said it can come for essay also this year. You have to come out with all this, if you are lucky, 125 marks. If you are not, minimum 20 marks. If you are extremely lucky, both essay as well as this one. Next, dryland farming. Dryland farming. That is very, very important. Dryland farming. So this is what you can write for this kind of questions. Next, mobilization of resources for developmental welfare schemes and also for infrastructure development is a major problem in front of the government. Suggest measures. If you look at our syllabus, mobilization of resources is one important topic, right? And till now, in the last 6 years, they have not asked any question about mobilization of resources. So how can the government mobilize the resources for infrastructure development as well as for implementing developmental welfare schemes? What can be done? What are the solutions will you offer to the government to mobilize the resources? And the problem here is that the resource mobilization should be done in such a manner that it will not impact aggregate demand of the country. What will you suggest? How can the government mobilize the resources? Pardon? Pardon? Now what I am suggesting here is that whenever the government is mobilizing the resources, it should not reduce the capabilities of people. If you are imposing more taxes, automatically it reduces the capabilities of people. Okay. What else? First and foremost, monetization of assets. Monetization of assets of the government. Government is sitting on huge amount of land and other assets, especially these public sector enterprises. This year economic survey also talked about this. Monetization of assets. Second, through large scale disinvestment. Privatization, not disinvestment, even privatization also. That is what we say. Government has no business to be in business. Privatization. This is another way the government can raise a huge amount of revenues. Third one is rationalization of user charges. Rationalization of user charges. government should ask people to pay for services, especially those who can afford to pay. Pay for services, those who can afford to pay. Whether it's water or electricity or anything, health or education, rationalization of user charges. Fourth one is expanding tax base, especially direct taxes. Even now also less than 5% of people pay or not pay, file income tax returns. Less than 5% of people file income tax returns. Out of which less than 2% will actually pay income tax. Filing income tax return does not mean that you are paying taxes. After demonetization, number of people filing income tax returns has increased, but there is no improvement in tax revenues. Expanding tax base. Next, what are the other suggestions that you can give for the government to mobilize resources? What are the other suggestions? Expanding tax base. Next, simplifying tax rates, especially GST. Let us have only 2 slabs. Otherwise, what is happening? Huge amount of people are claiming tax credit, input tax credit. Input tax credit is more than the government is taxing, collecting the taxes also. Rationalize the tax structures. A simplification of tax rates, then rationalizing tax structures, especially direct taxes, DTC, direct tax code. Rationalizing tax structures. Next, how else can the government earn more money? How can the government raise monies for pardon? Sovereign bonds, as we have discussed in the previous class also. Because the government can raise money, these foreign entities with very low rates of interest, sovereign bonds. Next, what else can the government do? 1 rupee saved is also 1 rupee earned. Ending subsidies, ending all subsidies, all unproductive, non-merit subsidies, populistic subsidies. A rupee saved is also rupee earned. Unproductive, non-merit subsidies. Non-merit subsidies. Next, closing down loss-making PSUs. Loss-making public sector enterprises. Something like Air India. Why are you still running Air India? You can close it down. Still someone buys it, close it down. Every day you are incurring so much of loss. Air India. Closing down loss-making public sector enterprises. Next, what else can the government do? How can the government mobilize resources? Pardon? FDI. No, I am talking about increasing the revenues of the government. How can the government mobilize resources? That is what the question says. Mobilization of resources for development welfare schemes and also for infrastructure development. What else can the government do? The government can get revenues only through either taxes or non-tax revenues. Taxes, indirect taxes and direct taxes. Non-tax revenues, in terms of disinvestment, sale of assets and capital revenues and revenue receipts, user charges and everything else. So these are all the measures. This is more than enough. If the government implements them, that will be more than sufficient. Next, globalization and liberalization witnessed high growth rates, but at the same time it also resulted in widening inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. Suggest reforms to realize objectives of inclusive growth. It resulted in widening inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. Subject is reforms to realize objectives of inclusive growth. I think this question, a similar question was asked 3 years back, inclusive growth. And this year also you can expect the same thing, inclusive growth. So what are the specific measures that will you suggest to realize objectives of inclusive growth? Yes, what will you suggest? You are talking about the 3 sectors, primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. This primary sector contributes significantly to GDP. Not only that, it also provides 50% of employment to the people. So obviously if you are talking about inclusive growth, you must focus on making agriculture profitable and sustainable. The first thing you have to focus on is making agriculture profitable and sustainable. Why this we are repeating? We are repeating agriculture. Why? Because unfortunately globalization has had no significant impact on agriculture in India, the way it has on industrial and tertiary sectors. So if the government wants to ensure inclusive growth, it must focus on agrarian reforms. Agrarian reforms. Because in agriculture we have different types of problems. We have disguised unemployment. We have direct unemployment also. So job-led growth is possible only by reforming agriculture, by making agriculture sustainable and profitable in the long term in rural areas. Next, agrarian reforms. Next, what else should the government do to ensure inclusive and equitable growth? As we have said, second one is job-led growth. Employment elasticity of growth, that is what we say. Employment elasticity of growth had come down drastically during the reform period, which is one of the important reasons for widening inequalities. Employment elasticity of growth is only 0.3% now. That means for every 1% increase in GDP, employment is going only by 0.3%. And unemployment rate is very highest in India. And how to ensure job-led growth? Yes, that is what next you will talk about. SMSs. SMSs. The government should focus on SMSs. Fourth, the government should focus on manufacturing sector. Because this is where maximum employment is there. Manufacturing sector. Then the fifth, the government must integrate all these flagship schemes. Make in India, Skill India, Startup India, Stand Up India. All these schemes should be integrated. Through Skill India, you are imparting skills. Through Make in India, you are helping them to, through Startup India, you are helping them to start industries. Through Make in India, you are making them productive. Through Stand Up India. So, integrate all these programs. Next, what should the government else do? The government should focus more on redistribution of income and wealth. Redistribution of income and wealth in the short term by effectively implementing developmental and welfare schemes. Redistribution of income and wealth. Effectively implementing developmental and welfare schemes. This is what the government should do. Next, what else should the government do? The government should focus more on backward regions. We should focus more on backward regions of the country by granting them special category status or by giving tax incentives by focusing on infrastructure, tax incentives or special category status, or by focusing on improving infrastructure. Next, inclusive growth not only in terms of economic but also social. So the government should focus on these scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs and minorities. By providing subsidized loans to them, by developing entrepreneurship among those people. This Mudra scheme, all these schemes. Next, inclusive growth is not possible without empowering women. So the government should focus more on women. We should develop a women entrepreneurship. Women entrepreneurship is very, very important. By developing focusing on self-help groups and through gender budgeting. This is what another thing that the government can do. Next, the government must also identify that sectors, for example, textiles, apparels, and other sectors which can provide a good amount of employment. Yes. And then next thing what the government can do is that NREGA can be changed to focus on imparting skills to people. What is the amount of money spent on NREGA can be spent on imparting skills to people so that they can find employment. They can find employment on their own. Then, the government can also give incentives for industries coming up in rural areas. Incentives to those industries which are coming up in rural areas. Yes. That is the problem right now. Through Skill India, skills are given to them. After that, they become unemployed again because they are not getting any jobs. Right now, that is the reason why the government, they have changed the minister also. They wanted to ensure interlinkage between all these schemes. That is what. What the market requires. Exactly. There is mismatch. The skills that they are imparting. What they have done is that, by integrating these programs, they don't have to look for employment in other industries. They can themselves start industries. Yes. Self-employment. Self-employment. Yes. Next, banking sector reforms in India are yet to be implemented to make public sector banks economically viable in the long run. Discuss. Recently, the government has implemented some of the reforms which the government calls them as reforms. If you happen to read today's Indian Express, I think Subbarao, former chairman of former governor of RBI, had written about PSBs, had written about merger of PSBs. So, what are the four banking sector reforms what are the reforms that you are talking about in banking sector? Why they have not been implemented? This is what economic survey famously talked about some time back. 2 years back, it talked about 4 R's. As part of banking sector reforms, it talked about these 4 R's. What are these 4 R's? Recognition. Then recapitalization, reform, and what is the fourth R? Resolution. Resolution. these 4 R's. Now, as part of the banking sector reforms, first recognize that there is a problem. This is what the government has not done. What is the major problem with public sector banks in India? What is the major problem? High levels of NPAs. High amount of NPAs. Right? Why very high NPAs? Why very high NPAs? Why? Because when did these NPAs had become very high? The period between 2005 and 2011, when public sector banks had given huge amount of loans to industry without any collateral securities also, most of the time. Without collateral securities also. Very high NPAs. Now, why they had given such huge amount of loans? Why? Because they got a directive from Finance Ministry. Finance Ministry had asked public sector enterprises to provide liberal loans. Why Finance Ministry had asked the public sector banks to provide liberal loans? Because to ensure rapid growth rate, 9% growth rate. Rapid growth rate. 9% growth rate. And what happened? When these loans were given, it resulted in a classic case of what is called crony capitalism. Crony capitalism. It was a classic case of crony capitalism. Unholy nexus between the management of public sector banks, politicians, and businessmen. Management of public sector banks, politicians, and businessmen. And here, the basic issue here is that this management of public sector banks are appointed by politicians, chairman and directors. Mostly politicians, active politicians are appointed as directors and chairman of public sector banks. And most of these businessmen also are only politicians. That means these politicians, on one hand, they have become management of public sector banks. On the other hand, they had taken loans from the public sector banks only. Politicians applied for loans and they also got the loans. That is where the problem. There is a complete, absence of what we call rule of law in the functioning of these public sector banks. This happened on a massive scale, as we said, during this period. You have to recognize this problem. Now, the basic issue is that the government has recognized the problem only to some extent. That is, NPAs are high, and these NPAs are high because of the loan melas conducted by public sector banks. Beyond that, the government did not look at it. Why? Because the government does not want to lose control over public sector banks, management of public sector banks. The recognition, then recapitalization. This is what the government has done from time to time. Since 2012, more than 2 lakh crores of rupees were given to public sector banks to overcome the problems of NPAs. Recapitalization. 2012, more than 2 lakh crores of rupees. Even this year also, the government promised 70,000 crores recapitalization. Then reform. This is what the government has not focused on. Reforming public sector banks has not been done. The government has tried to reform public sector banks with setting up of a bank boards bureau headed by former CAG Vinod Roy, but that did not result in any transparency or accountability. Still, most of the public sector banks are headed by politicians only, the directors as well as thing. Then resolution of the bad debts unfortunately, the government had come out with the solution in the form of this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, as ISBC. And ISBC has not been effective at all. ISBC has not been effective. ISBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Due to legal problems and administrative issues, ISBC has not been effective. And in recent times, what did the government do? And apart from this, RBI also had come out with a prompt corrective action. Prompt corrective action. RBI asking the public sector banks to reform themselves. But the government had asked RBI to go slow with prompt corrective action because it has resulted in what is called credit squeeze. RBI has not permitted public sector banks to provide fresh loans unless they correct their balance sheets, resulting in liquidity crunch. So to overcome this problem, what did the government do? To overcome this problem, the government had come out with this measure of banks. Merger of banks. Thinking that this will be helping the government to overcome these restrictions imposed by RBI through PCA, prompt corrective action. So basically what did the government do? Strong banks were merged with weak banks. Strong banks were merged with weak banks. Strong banks were merged with weak banks. Now coming to the question, what should be done? This is what the government has done. But what ideally should be done? What ideally should be done? What ideally should be done? Even still, it is said that the NPS announced by the banks are only a fraction of what the real NPS are. Most of the banks are not coming out with the real NPS also. There is no transparency. That is the reason why the first solution we are asking about is professionalization of management of public sector banks. Professionalization of management of public sector banks. How to do this professionalization? Separation of ownership from management. Separation of ownership from management. Initially, this is what the government has to do. Separation of ownership from management. The government can retain the ownership, but the day-to-day management should be completely privatized. Yeah, ICICI. Even ICICI also problem is there. Chandra Kuchar. Yes. ICICI is also not professionally run. HDFC is good. HDFC is good. Separation of ownership from management, professionalization of management of banks. Third thing the government should do is, this capital adequacy norms should be fully implemented. Capital adequacy norms. Next thing is that the risk evaluation of assets should be done in a scientific manner. What are the assets of public sector banks? The loans given by them. This risk evaluation should be done in a professional manner. Risk evaluation of assets should be done in a professional manner so that it minimizes the scope for NPS. Next, what should the government do? Next one is there must be complete transparency in the functioning of public sector banks. There should be a lot of transparency. What kind of transparency we are talking about? The names of defaulters should be made public on a real-time basis. That is what we have to do. That is what we have to do. Name and shame those defaulters to bring about behavioral changes. Name and shame the defaulters. Name and shame the defaulters. Next thing what should the government do is that Public sector banks should also adopt new accounting techniques, accrual based accounting techniques, accrual based accounting techniques. Accrual based accounting, this is a new accounting technique, normally which is mostly used in European countries and for all multinational companies. Next, what else should be done? Government should close down those public sector banks whose net worth is becoming negative. Close those public sector banks whose net worth is becoming negative. Net worth becoming negative means the difference between their assets and liabilities is going to be negative. Close down public sector banks. Next, ultimately the final solution should be privatization of public sector banks. Privatization of public sector banks. Yeah, majority shareholding can be sold. Government can retain 49% ownership, 51% can be given privatization of so that it will become much more professional. Yes, just like you're purchasing shares of companies, you can also buy the shares of public sector banks. That is what we say. You have to write. Again, I'm sure this year banking sector reforms can be asked. This year, as I said, in important questions in your economy, basically banking sector reforms, then reforms in power sector, then reforms in this road transportation, and then you talk about the question which I have asked, textile and apparel industry. These are all very important questions. And then, in fact, I have given all those questions in your important questions also. Can you just go through all of them? UPSC, I don't think will go beyond those things. Next, let us move on to the next question. Textile and apparel industry is in India is facing both internal and external challenges. Discuss the problems and suggest solutions. So, what are the problems of a textile industry? I am sure this year there's a question will be about this textile industry. They can ask. First, let us talk about the importance of this industry. It contributes 10% to total manufacturing production in India. Textile industry, 10% to total manufacturing sector, 5% of GDP, and 13% of exports. 13% of exports. Employment you will find out, right? Let us directly go into the problems. First and foremost, export growth. Export growth. But the problem is that countries like America at this point of time, countries like America and Europe are under recession, because of which they are not importing much from countries like India. The recession in developed countries is impacting our exports. Next, second one is a multi-fiber agreement. Under this multi-fiber agreement, quotas were imposed on developing countries. Quotas were imposed on developing countries to protect the farmers of developed countries. And what happened in a European Union did not impose any quotas for countries like Bangladesh. What is the reason why Bangladesh is exporting a huge amount compared to India? There are no restrictions on the export of textiles by Bangladesh. European Union has removed countries like Bangladesh from this multi-fiber agreement, whereas India has to suffer because of the quotas that are imposed on us. And then apart from this, we also have anti-dumping laws, then countervailing duties, environmental and labor issues. All these are all major problems for India. This guy, he got Nobel Prize in Nobel Peace Prize, Kailash Satyarthi. Why? Because for these reasons only he got Nobel Peace Prize. Next problem is buyer-driven commodity chains. Commodity chains. For example, if you look at textile industry, the finished products will always be from developed countries. All these jeans and all these textile companies, cloth companies are from developed countries. And they are determining the prices of inputs from developing countries. What we call in economics as a monopsony. Monopoly means single seller. Monopsony means single buyer. That is the reason why our textile manufacturers are not able to get proper prices. Next one is that climatic conditions also. Climatic conditions. This is a very strange problem faced by India. India is a hot and humid country. So all our products basically are to suit to summer needs of Indians. Whereas in Western countries, they require woolen clothes, which our textile industry does not produce much. Climatic conditions. Where do we see these woolen clothes in India? Only in hill stations. Rest of India is, in India you have only 3 seasons, hot, hotter and hottest. So obviously Western countries are cold countries. They want woolen clothes. That is where the problem. Mismatch between demand and supply. Next problem is infrastructure. Especially logistics and imports. Countries like India lack infrastructure. Next problem is the recent tendency of the government to impose customs duties on imports. It has impacted the textile industry to impose the customs duties on imports. It has adversely impacted textile industry. Why? Because they are importing some raw material from foreign. That is where. Next, high cost of capital. High cost of capital. In India, these people get loans at around 12%. Whereas in countries like China, they get loans around 5% only. High cost of capital. Lack of fiber neutrality. Next problem they say is lack of fiber neutrality. Man-made textiles, whenever you look at the textile products, man-made products are always in much more demand than machine products. India, in terms of production, India is second in the world in terms of man-made products. But the problem is that high cost is preventing India from capturing the global markets. And not only that, different tax imposed by developed countries. Next problem is limited FTAs, free trade agreements, limited free FTAs. India, countries like Bangladesh or Cambodia or Pakistan, they have huge amount of FTAs with the rest of the world, especially in the textile sector. India has limited FTAs only. A free trade agreement means obviously tariffs will not be imposed. Their products will become much more competitive. Next one is factor cost. Labor cost in India is very high compared to Bangladesh or Pakistan. The factor cost is very high. Next problem is GST. They are not able to get input tax. They are not able to get input tax credits on time. And GST has increased overall cost of production also because taxes are imposed at each and every level also. GST. On time. Exporters. That is the reason why if you look at in a recent budget measures talked about the finance minister, she said that within 15 days they will be getting input tax credit. Next, duty drawback rates. Duty drawback rates. So, what did the government do? The government had reduced this duty drawback rates on government exports from 1st October 2017. From 1st October 2017. And what is this duty drawback rate? It is the refund that a businessman gets for importing the raw material. It is a refund that a businessman gets for importing the raw material. And it has reduced competitiveness of Indian products abroad. Competitiveness. And then next problem is efficiency. Efficient utilization of our resources. India uses only 40 to 45% of its resources compared to China 60 to 65%. Then recent ban on cow slaughter also. Why? Because the skin is used for garments and everything. Ban on cow slaughter also. You have to talk about all of them. Then once you know the problems, you can always come out with solutions. Reverse them and you will get the solutions. Cybersecurity has become a major law and order issue in recent times. Discuss with example and suggest measures. Cybersecurity, I think this one you have to do it on your own, because I don't have much knowledge about this cybersecurity, internet and all these things, science and technology. What I will do is that I will give you this study material, you can read it, because the question can definitely be asked. Now when we talk about cybersecurity, basically, let me, from a layman's point of view, let me tell you what are the basic problems here. First one is lack of uniformity in devices and internet access. For example, iPhones have best security features. In a country like America, more than 50 to 60% of population use iPhones. So their devices have a lot of security. Whereas in India, in smartphones in India, we don't have those security features. There is huge amount of difference. How many people in India use iPhones? Very less percent of population. All the Chinese products that we are using, they don't have security features. Your data can be stolen very easily, and there is a lot of threat to your data and information. Then we don't have any national level architecture for cyber security. All this critical infrastructure is owned by private sector only in India. The government does not have any proper infrastructure. And next problem is that in our cyberspace there is no separation. There is no separation in our cyberspace. That is what they say. Separation of boundaries. For example, armed forces, separate cyberspace. In a public sector enterprise, separate cyberspace. Private sector, there is no separation here. Everyone will be using the same source. That can result in a lot of problems. Hacking becomes very easy. And fourth, lack of awareness among the people about cybersecurity. Lack of awareness among the people about cybersecurity. If you look at India, India is third in terms of use of internet users after USA and China. But when it comes to security, India is among the top 10 spam sending countries in the world. Top 10 spam sending countries in the world along with America. India is among the, it is ranked among top 5 countries affected by cybercrime. But still we have lack of awareness about cyber security. What are the major cyber security threats the country had witnessed in the last few years? Do you remember? Yes, hacking the website, SBI, debit cards and all the things. Next. Can you remember anything else? Aadhaar data breach. Okay, fine. Then, in recent, last year there was something called ransomware. Yes. And before that, WannaCry, that also is there. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay. So the more I talk about them, the more I will be revealing my ignorance. So I will give you these things, you can read them. But definitely, you can expect one question on cyber security. Next, Disaster Management Act 2005 defines disaster management as a continuous and integrated process involving planning, organization, coordinating and implementing. Next, take any natural disaster and explain the process mentioned in NDMA 2005. How disaster management activity take place in India? Theoretical questions. So what are the natural disasters? You can take any natural disaster. What are the natural disasters that you can think of? Floods or anything. You can take anything. Floods or then cyclones or droughts and famines. Then air pollution, increasing air pollution. Then deforestation, right? Then earthquakes. So what you have to do is that take any of the natural disaster and explain how this disaster should be tackled from the point of view of NDMA 2005. Basically talks about 4 important cyclical process. First one is mitigation, or preparedness. Mitigation. First one is prevention or mitigation. The first step is prevention or mitigation. Second step is preparedness. The second step is preparedness. Third step is response. And fourth step is recovery and rehabilitation. And this recovery and rehabilitation should again be leading to mitigation. That is what we call cyclical process. So you can take any natural disaster. You can take the Gujarat earthquake 2002. You can take a tsunami 2004. You can take floods in different parts of the country, or you can take last year Kerala floods. And you can take severe drought and famine conditions that the country witnesses on a regular basis. From that point of view, you have to explain all these 4 things. What is mitigation? What is preparedness? Because when it comes to natural disasters, what we say is that we cannot prevent these disasters. Can natural disasters be prevented? We can have mitigation for man-made disasters. For in case of natural disasters, you have to reduce the impact of. You cannot prevent them. You cannot prevent a natural disaster. Can you prevent a cyclone? Can you prevent an earthquake? Obviously, you cannot prevent them. But floods can be prevented, but not cyclones. Floods are man-made disasters, and cyclones are natural disasters. We can prevent them. So you have to talk from disaster management from these 4 points of view, starting with what kind of preventive measures can be taken to reduce the impact of floods. First one. Second one is preparedness. Preparedness in terms of everything, in terms of when it comes to floods, preparedness in terms of storing medicines, food items, early cyclone warnings and everything else. Third one is response, immediate response. As we say that in any natural disaster, the first 24 hours are crucial. First 24 hours are crucial. This is when you can save life as well as property. Response. And the fourth one is recovery and rehabilitation. This is long-term measure. As part of recovery and rehabilitation, basically you are ensuring that when it comes to in the flood-prone areas, the houses are constructed at a, if at all you are constructing houses in low-lying areas, they should be constructed at a height, so that they can escape. If in the previous floods, if the flood water had come up to say 4 feet, houses should be constructed at least 5 feet above the ground level. That is what is called recovery and rehabilitation. That is also what is called prevention. You have to take one example and explain those things. The last 3 questions are, I think, basically about the science and technology. I think these questions are also important from the examination point of view. If you look at them, solid waste management. This is part of science and technology as well as environment. And then the 3D printing. 3D printing was asked, I think, some time back, 15, 16, I think. So, yes. Availability of antibiotics without disasters will contribute to emergence of drug-resistant diseases in India. These are all mostly practical questions. So this is what you have to remember, right? And let us look at social issues also from paper 1. The social issues from paper 1. Nine and 10. Population growth can be a boon as well as a bane for a country like India. But at present, significant efforts should be made to limit population growth in the country. If you look at the social issues given by UPSC, population is also one of the important social issues. Why we have asked this question? Because this year in his Independence Day address, our Prime Minister has specifically spoken about reducing population. But at present, why? Because as we have said that India can benefit out of this, what you call demographic dividend till the year 2050. After that, we will have to pay again very heavy price for it. And the problem is that our demographic bulge is not transforming itself into demographic dividend. We have huge amount of population. It is not productive or capable population with skills. In a country like Korea, South Korea, more than 90% of population is skilled population, whereas in India it is less than 2% of our population skilled population. So obviously we have to limit population growth. Otherwise it can become a major problem for India. So how to limit this population growth? What are the steps that can be taken? It is said that normally when we talk about these things, they say that development is the best contraceptive. That is what the statement they make. Development is the best contraceptive. What do you mean by that? If the societies are becoming more developed, automatically we will go into what is called the third stage of this population. Yes. When the country societies are becoming developed, obviously with the development, cost of production also, cost of living also will increase. Then people will realize that it is no longer possible for them to afford poor children. That is the reason why they also realize the fact that it is not possible for them to provide all this better standard of living to all the children. That is automatically that it will reduce the population. Development is the best contraceptive. Next, what else can be done to reduce population? You talk about positive reinforcers. The government can say that the benefits of developmental schemes for only those people who reduce the population. Benefits of development schemes can be made conditional. Third thing is that negatively the government can also exclude population, exclude large families from developmental schemes. You have to bring in what is called behavioral changes. You have to bring in behavioral changes. And if you look at India, there is huge amount of variation. That is what economic survey again this year talks about, a huge amount of variation. South Indian states almost have reached 0% fertility, reproductivity levels, whereas in North India it is still not the case. And what is the reason why? It is the poverty. Why? Because when the society is poor, when they think that one more person coming into the family means two more hands contributing to the food of the family. That is the reason why obviously in North Indian states there should be awareness, clear awareness, and also should be focused on development. Once the societies become developed, automatically population also come down naturally. And then what else can be done by the government to reduce this population growth? What else can be done? Pardon? Women empowerment. Yes, women empowerment, and next one is male contraceptives also should be made popular. Female labor participation and all the other things you can write. Yeah. Small families can be given more tax incentives. Yes. Yeah, you can write one more thing. That is, if to contest elections to local bodies, the condition should be not more than two children. Not only local bodies, right from panchayat to parliament. Next, globalization has made our societies more conservative than making them more inclusive and open. Discuss the reason for this paradox. A similar question was asked last year also, the same thing. Yeah. Like in population. If you want, you can write a social difference. Yeah. Obviously. Globalization has made our societies more conservative than making them more inclusive and open. Discuss the reasons for this paradox. Why globalization has made our societies more conservative? Why? It has made our societies more conservative than making them more inclusive and open. So basically globalization has resulted in the emergence of what we call materialistic societies. In materialistic societies, people don't look beyond their family. They don't look beyond their family. They made societies more selfish oriented. Self-interest dominates. So that is the reason why they made societies more conservative. It made societies more conservative. What we call social awareness has come down drastically among citizens. Social awareness. Why? Because education system also is completely technical oriented with less emphasis on values also. Less emphasis on values also. Value neutral. Not value neutral, valueless. Value neutral is good. It is valueless. Next, another problem with globalization is that it has increased so much of competition. It made societies highly competitive. Obviously, when the societies become too competitive, they also become too conservative also. Because the people won't be able to think beyond their immediate needs. Competition. Next thing, why globalization has made societies. Another problem is that not only in our societies, countries also had become too conservative. Protectionist policies followed by countries like America or UK or any other country. Protectionist. You are looking at people with a lot of suspicion, those who are coming into your society from outside with a lot of suspicion. Yeah, xenophobic. That is what you have to write for these things. It should have resulted in what we call a global village. On the other hand, it has only increased more restrictions, imposed more boundaries, and made societies much more conservative. Yes, obviously that's why. Why? Because money has no color, nor religion, nor nationality. A dollar is a dollar all over the world. Next, look at this question. 19th question. Reasons for collapse of urban infrastructure are not difficult to see. It is only that our policymakers are blind to them. Do you agree? Substantiate your answer. Again, this urbanization and the problems of urbanization. Why do we say that reasons for urban collapse of urban infrastructure are not difficult to see? Why urban infrastructure has collapsed? And why do we say that our policymakers are blind to them? Substantiate your answer. Why urban infrastructure has collapsed? Why it has collapsed in India? Pardon? First and foremost, huge amount of increase in urban population. Huge amount of increase in urban population. Second, in a failure of successive governments to come out with long-term plans to improve urban infrastructure. Failure of successive governments to come out with long-term plans to improve urban infrastructure. Third, in an ad hoc approach to urban development. Ad hoc approach to urban development. Fourth, political populism. That is giving free subsidies to people. Political populism. Fifth, failure to empower local self-governments in urban areas. Failure to empower local self-governments in urban areas. Empower local self-governments in urban areas. Next, sixth, too much of politicization and corruption in urban management, urban development. Too much of politicization and corruption in urban development. Next, lack of people participation in urban development. These are all the problems why urban infrastructure has almost collapsed. You can see every year these floods in cities like Mumbai. Even yesterday also Mumbai was completely flooded. And people will forget. Every year in Delhi you can see huge amount of air pollution during the time of winter, Diwali. People will forget. Traffic congestions. had become the order of the day. And underground drainage is not there in any of the major cities fully. And roads, management of road transportation. And then public safety. These things are almost completely absent. We can easily see, except that our policy makers are blind to them. These are all the. Just write down the points straight away. Because write down the points, give examples for every point. Next, solutions will reverse all these problems. India requires 1 lakh smart villages so that we can stop urban migration. People distress migration, mostly distress migration. Failure to come out with long-term plans. As part of smart cities, every urban city must come out with a long-term sustainable plan. How it is going to tackle problems like housing, transportation, pollution, communication, drinking water. They must come out with long-term plan, not only for today, after 20 years also. Like this. Then ad hoc approach to urban development. This ad hoc approach should be completely replaced with long-term sustainable approach. Then political populism. We must end political populism like what we are seeing in Delhi or in all other urban areas. What are the limited resources they have? They are using them to give free subsidies to people. On the other hand, they are not willing to impose taxes also. Housing, as economic survey last year talks about. You must improve your resources. Empower urban local bodies. 74th Amendment. Functions, functionaries and finances. Reduce corruption by ensuring transparency and accountability. For example, BMC, Brahim Mumbai Municipal Corporation, has said that they had spent around 5,000 crores of rupees on repairing the roads. Where is the money? The money went into the drain along with the rainwater. That is what corruption. This is what. Ensure participation of stakeholders. Transfer power from political executive and bureaucracy and contractors to people. For example, the road is constructed in front of your house. You will decide what should be the quality of the road, who is the contractor, and how to maintain the road. Everything should be done. That is what is called neighborhood management. Social audit. Whatever the name you want to give, you can give it. Next, women empowerment will remain a pipe dream unless comprehensive and multidimensional reforms are implemented. Comment. Every year you will have lots of questions about women. So what are the comprehensive reforms that we are talking about as part of women empowerment? Either every year it will be asked as part of essay, all in social issues or in ethics case studies. So what are the reforms that you are talking about? First and foremost, this safety and security of women at workplaces and in public places. Then, next, promoting their economic independence through self-help groups in rural areas. Ensuring their economic independence through self-help groups in rural areas. Third, gender budgeting. Money is spent for, reserved for them should be spent only on them only. Fourth, reservations in parliament and state assemblies, political empowerment, reservations in parliament and state assemblies. Then fifth, ensuring severe punishment for those people who commit crimes against women. Severe punishment. Next, breaking the glass ceiling in the private sector. by providing opportunities for women to reach top level positions. By providing opportunities for women to reach top level positions even in the private sector also. Next, making development gender neutral. Making development gender neutral by providing equal opportunities for women also, like men in all the professions. In all professions. Next, eradicating social evils like dowry and child marriages. Social evils like dowry and child marriages. Next, providing free education to women from KG to PG. Free education to women from KG to PG. Kindergarten to post graduation. KG to PG. That is what you can write. So this is, I think, more than enough. And day after tomorrow, 11:30, we have the discussion of ethics paper also. Here only. Day after tomorrow, 11:30, the discussion of ethics paper. Pardon? Answer, you are getting the answers for paper. Rest of the questions, you will be getting the answers for history and geography. You will be getting the written answers. Just now it's 7th. Okay, that also is there. Analyze the reasons for recent increase in intolerance in our societies. This is also a social issue only. Yes. Analyze the reasons for recent increase in intolerance in our societies. Why there is increasing intolerance in our societies? Basically the same thing, jobless growth. Jobless growth. Then second, aggressive nationalism in the name of patriotism. Aggressive nationalism in the name of patriotism. Third, communalization of societies. Increasing communalization of societies. Increasing communalization of societies. Fourth, increasing caste identities. Caste identities. Then failure to implement rule of law. Failure to punish those people who are committing crimes. Failure to implement rule of law. And absence of value education in schools and colleges. You can raise all these things. And again, you can expect these questions, yes. Yeah. Why they are not coming down? Because the policies are not sincere. The government intentions you can always question, and implementation is far from effective. As I said, there is no rule of law. Yes, political lack of commitment. The government does not want any egalitarian society. The government wants poor people to be poor only. They don't want poor people to be rich. All these poverty elevation programs ensure that poor people will always remain poor. They will never become rich. By giving 5 kilos of rice, will that person become rich? By asking me to go to government schools where the standards are so low, can he ever become educated? That is where the problem. Lack of commitment, absence of commitment. Why? Because if poor people become rich, where will rich people go? That is what we study in public administration. Elite mass model. It is the ruling elite who makes policies for ordinary masses. When the ruling elite makes policies for ordinary masses, their objective is to ensure that ordinary masses will always remain poor, backward and illiterate, and there will only be what you call insignificant improvements in their life, but they will always remain poor. That is what the question, political commitment. For example, as we had discussed in education there, America with a population of 30 crores, 25-30 crores has 58 universities in top 100 universities. With a population of 130 crores, how many universities should we have? We don't have. Why? Because lack of commitment. That is what. Yes. Yeah, everywhere you can use it. While writing about the parliamentary committee system, conflict of interest. While writing about judiciary, conflict of interest. You can write about all that. Because at least in case of women it can become success. In other cases, reservation policy has not become successful because of emergence of what we call creamy layer. In case of women, at least any woman, whether it is rich or poor women, urban or rural women, benefits it can result in empowerment of women. Pardon? Let them benefit. At least some women benefit. That is why are you cynical? Let someone benefit. Let someone benefit, right? Even before implementing, you are coming out with so many cynical observations. That really shows your commitment, reveals your true personality. Yeah, I know. You are trying to only give explanation for what he is saying. So we are meeting on day after tomorrow, 11:30, to discuss ethics paper. And tomorrow tomorrow morning I will be giving important questions for this internal security disaster management as well as IR also. Most of the things we already have discussed in our class. I will be giving. Already I have given questions for polity, economy, I think. Those things. Polity also I have given. You can just go through that. Pardon? I am talking about, I will be giving important questions for internal security, disaster management and IR. Tomorrow. You can come and take it here, or day after tomorrow you can collect when you come.